My brother-in-law tried to take over our family business after my husband passed away. He said, "It's what your husband would have wanted." In court, he presented fake documents. I handed over the real will, and his lawyer's confidence disappeared. The judge said, "This case is over." I never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. This is the story of how my brother-in-law tried to steal everything from me after my husband passed away. He thought he could walk in, take over our family business, and leave me with nothing. He even faked legal documents to do it. But I had the real ones. And when I pulled them out in court, his lawyer's confidence disappeared so fast it was almost funny. My husband, David, and I ran a small but successful construction company together. We started it from scratch, putting in long hours, dealing with tough clients, and pouring everything we had into making it work. It was our baby. We built a solid reputation, had loyal customers, and, most importantly, we did things the right way. Then, last year, David died. A sudden heart attack. No warning. 1 second, he was there, talking about what we'd have for dinner, and the next, he was gone. Losing him shattered me. The grief was unbearable, but I had to keep going. I had employees depending on me, projects in progress, and customers expecting their jobs to be finished. At first, I thought my brother-in-law, Mike, was stepping up to help. He was David's younger brother, and while he was never really involved in the business, he had always hung around. He'd stop by job sites, chat with the workers, and sometimes offer ideas, most of them bad, to be honest. I never thought much of it. After David's funeral, Mike started showing up more often. At first, I assumed he was just checking in on me. He'd stop by the office, bring coffee, and say things like, "I just want to make sure you're okay." But then, little things started changing. He started making suggestions about how we should modernize the business. He told the employees they should report to him. He even signed off on an invoice, without asking me. That's when I knew something was off. One morning, Mike walked into my office like he owned the place. He sat down across from me, completely casual, and said, "I think it's time we make things official. I'll take over the business." It's what David would have wanted. I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. But he wasn't. He slid a folder across my desk. "These are the transition papers. Just sign them, and I'll take care of everything." I opened the folder and my stomach dropped. The document said I was voluntarily handing over the company to him. There was even a signature on the last page, mine. Only, I had never signed anything. I looked at Mike, stunned. "Are you serious? You think I'm just going to let you take the company?" His whole demeanor changed. The fake concern was gone. Now, he looked annoyed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Listen," he said, leaning forward. "You don't know how to run this place without David." "I do. You have no idea how much work this takes. Just sign the papers, take the insurance money, and move on." I shoved the papers back at him. "Get out." He didn't argue. He just shook his head like I was making a huge mistake and walked out. That's when the real trouble started. Over the next few weeks, things got weird. Long-time clients suddenly started pulling their contracts. Suppliers said they were told we weren't paying our bills. Employees got calls from management saying the company was shutting down. And then my bank called. "Are you sure you want to change the business account details?" the woman on the phone asked. "What?" I said. She hesitated. "We received a request to transfer ownership of your business accounts to Michael." I was shaking. "Do not do anything. That request is fraudulent." It turned out Mike had sent in documents claiming he was the new owner. He almost got away with it, too. I called my lawyer, and we started digging. It was worse than I thought. Mike had been telling everyone, clients, suppliers, even the employees, that he was taking over. He told them I wasn't handling things well after David's death and that I had agreed to step down. Some people believed him. Others weren't sure. But the damage was real. Then, he made his biggest move. One day, I got a letter from a lawyer. It was an official notice that Mike was claiming ownership of the business through David's will. Only, I had David's real will in my safe. And it left everything to me. The document Mike submitted was fake. It said David had wanted the business to go to his brother, to ensure it remains in the family. The signature was close, but it wasn't David's. I called my lawyer, who immediately filed an objection. A few days later, we were in court. I walked in, heart pounding, and saw Mike sitting at the table with his lawyer, looking smug. His lawyer stood up and confidently presented their case. He went on and on about how David wanted his brother to continue his legacy, and how I was emotionally compromised. Then, he handed the judge the fake will. I let them talk. I let them say whatever they wanted. And then, when it was my turn, I stood up, walked over to my lawyer, and pulled out the real will. The judge looked at it. Then at Mike. Then back at the document. Mike's lawyer's face changed instantly. I'll never forget that moment. Mike's lawyer's confidence vanished the moment the judge read the real will. The room fell dead silent. The judge flipped through the pages carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, she looked up at Mike's lawyer. Do you have any proof to support your client's claim? Mike's lawyer hesitated. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, and tried to recover. Well, Your Honor, we believe there may be. The judge cut him off. Belief is not evidence. Mike was gripping the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. His smug attitude was gone. I just stared at him, waiting. He knew he was caught. But he wasn't done yet. His lawyer scrambled, trying to argue that the will I presented could be outdated or altered. They wanted a handwriting expert, forensic analysis, anything to stall. I was ready for that. My lawyer handed over everything. The original will, signed and notarized. The video recording of David signing it in front of our attorney. The bank statements proving that David had transferred full ownership to me years ago. There was nothing they could do. Mike's lawyer sat down slowly, defeated. That's when Mike did something unbelievable. He stood up and started shouting. This is a setup. She forged it. That's not the real will. His lawyer tried to pull him back down, whispering, stop talking. Mike ignored him. He turned to me, pointing a shaking finger. You think you can just take everything? This was supposed to be mine. You can't run this company without David. You'll run it into the ground, just like you ruined his life. I felt my stomach drop. The audacity. He was spitting lies in open court. The judge slammed her gavel. Enough. Sit down, Mr. Carter. Mike wasn't listening. He kept ranting, listing all the reasons why he deserved the company. How he had sacrificed so much, how he had helped build it, how he had been waiting for his turn. The judge motioned for the bailiff, and within seconds, Mike was forced back into his seat. His lawyer buried his face in his hands. But the drama wasn't over yet. Just when I thought we were done, Mike's lawyer pulled out another document. I swear my heart stopped for a second. Your Honor, he said, voice steadier than before. My client also has a contract signed by the deceased, granting him partnership rights in the business. I froze. What contract? I turned to my lawyer. He looked just as confused as I was. The judge took the papers and read them. Then she looked at Mike's lawyer. When was this signed? 3 months before David's passing, he said, a little too confidently. The judge's eyebrow lifted. Interesting. Because I see no notary seal, no witness signature, and the name of the business is misspelled in 2 places. The courtroom fell silent again. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Mike turned bright red. His lawyer's confidence shattered again. Additionally, the judge continued, David was in the hospital recovering from surgery on the date this contract was supposedly signed. I doubt he was reviewing legal documents at the time. Checkmate. Mike was done. Or so I thought. After court that day, I assumed that was the end of it. The case was going in my favor, and Mike had been humiliated in front of everyone. But he wasn't finished. That very night, I got a call from my office manager. Someone broke into the office, she said, voice shaky. Files are missing. Client contracts, invoices, they're all gone. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the office, and sure enough, the place had been ransacked. Mike had tried to cover his tracks. But what he didn't know was that I kept digital copies of everything. I pulled up the security footage. It was too blurry to see faces clearly, but we could make out a figure wearing a hoodie and gloves. I had no proof it was Mike. Yet. The next day, my foreman, one of David's oldest friends, pulled me aside. You need to hear this, he said. He handed me a voice recording. I played it. It was a conversation between Mike and one of our subcontractors. Mike was offering him money to delay our projects and sabotage our materials. My blood boiled. He had been trying to tank my business from the inside. This was beyond revenge. This was war. After finding out that Mike was actively trying to sabotage my business, I was beyond furious. I didn't just want to win in court. I wanted to bury him. But I had to be careful. He had already proven he was willing to forge documents and manipulate people to get what he wanted. If I made the wrong move, he could twist it and make himself look like the victim. So I played it smart. I sent my lawyer the voice recording of Mike bribing the subcontractor and told him to hold on to it. I didn't want to show my hand just yet. I needed more evidence. And that's when something unexpected happened. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A man's voice came through the line. You don't know me, but I know Mike. And I have something you're going to want to see. I sat up straight. Who is this? I can't say over the phone, he replied. But I used to work with him. And I know what he's doing to you. Meet me tomorrow at Joe's Diner, 10 a.m. I'll be at the back booth. Then he hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. I barely slept that night. My brain kept running through all the possibilities. Was this a trap? Some scheme of Mike's to throw me off? Or was this a real lead? By morning, I had made my decision. I was going. Joe's Diner was an old school, no-frills kind of place. The kind where the waitresses still called you Hon, and the coffee was terrible. I walked in at 9:55 a.m. and scanned the booths. And that's when I saw him. A man in his late 50s, graying hair, wearing a faded work jacket. He looked up as I approached and gave a small nod. I slid into the booth across from him. Who are you? He took a deep breath. Name's Jim. I used to handle Mike's finances when he ran that investment firm a few years back. I stiffened. Mike had a history of bad business deals, but David had always bailed him out. It was one of the biggest fights we ever had, David loaning Mike money despite my warnings. Jim continued. I don't work for him anymore. And after what he did to me, I'd like to see him burn. I leaned in. What do you mean? Jim smirked. Mike's in debt. Bad debt. He lost a lot of money gambling, got mixed up with some very dangerous people. That's why he's so desperate to take your company. My stomach dropped. I knew Mike was reckless, but I had no idea he was this deep in trouble. Then Jim pulled a USB drive from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. This, he said, is every shady deal he's made in the last 5 years. Bank statements, emails, illegal withdrawals. Everything. I stared at the drive, barely able to process what was happening. You use this right, Jim said, and he won't just lose in court. He'll go to prison. That night, I sat in my office with my lawyer, going through the files. What we found was worse than I imagined. Mike had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from investors. He had laundered money through fake business accounts. He had even bribed a city inspector to approve illegal construction projects. And here was the kicker, he had used my company's name on one of those fake accounts. I felt physically sick. If the authorities ever uncovered this without my knowledge, I could have been dragged into it. We had to act fast. I called the authorities first thing the next morning. Within hours, investigators were tearing through Mike's financial records. Mike must have figured out something was happening, because that same afternoon, I got another call. It was my office manager. You need to come to the office, she whispered. Right now. I got there in 10 minutes flat. When I walked in, my heart nearly stopped. Mike was standing in the middle of the office. But he wasn't alone. He had brought my employees. Half of them were standing behind him. The other half looked uncomfortable but weren't saying anything. Mike turned to face me, arms crossed. Grinning. You should have just signed the papers, he said. I looked at my employees, the people who had worked beside me and David for years. Some of them wouldn't even meet my eyes. You're making a mistake, I said, keeping my voice steady. Mike smirked. No. You did, when you went after me. They know this company is failing under you. They know I can save it. So I made them an offer, stay with me, or go down with you. I clenched my jaw. How much are you paying them? His smirk widened. Doesn't matter. I took a deep breath. Then I looked around the room. I get it, I said. Some of you are scared. Some of you don't know who to trust. But let me make one thing clear. I turned back to Mike. You're done. He laughed. Am I? I pulled out my phone and played the voice recording. The one where he admitted to bribing the subcontractor to delay projects. The room went dead silent. One by one, my employees realized what he had done. The one standing behind him slowly stepped away. And then my foreman, David's old friend, spoke. You tried to destroy this company, he said, glaring at Mike. David would be ashamed of you. Mike's grin vanished. He was losing control. And then, right on cue, the police walked in. I folded my arms and looked him right in the eye. This is over. Just as they were about to take him away, Mike did something I never saw coming. He ran. Shoved a cop, knocked over a chair, and bolted for the door. I watched, stunned, as he disappeared down the street, sirens blaring behind him. He had nothing left to lose. And that's when I realized, this wasn't over yet. Mike was desperate. And desperate people do crazy things. And I wasn't safe. Mike was on the run. The police were after him, his lawyer had abandoned him, and his reputation was in shambles. But I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't safe. Desperate people do desperate things. And Mike? He had nothing left to lose. I started watching my back. I changed my locks. I had security cameras installed at my house and office. I even kept a bat by my front door. Just in case. And then, one night, it happened. It was just after midnight. I had just turned off the lights when I heard it. A noise outside. A rustling. Then a click. I held my breath. Someone was at my front door. I grabbed my phone and the bat, heart pounding. My security cameras should have picked up anyone approaching, but my phone showed nothing. The power to my cameras had been cut. That's when I heard the window creak open. And I knew. It was Mike. I didn't panic. I moved quietly. Positioned myself behind the door. Bat raised. The window slid open all the way. Then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I gripped the bat tighter. My pulse was hammering in my ears. A shadow moved toward me. Then, I swung. The bat connected with something solid. A grunt. A stumble. I flicked on the lights. And there he was. Mike, on the ground, clutching his arm. His face twisted in rage. You crazy bee *****H, he spat, trying to get up. I stepped forward, bat still raised. I was done being scared. You broke into my house. My voice was calm. Controlled. His eyes were wild. You ruined my life. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You did that all by yourself, Mike. He started to lunge at me, but then, sirens. I had already called the cops. The moment they burst in, he tried to run. Again. But he didn't get far. They tackled him in my front yard. I stood in my doorway, watching as they dragged him away, kicking and screaming. She set me up, he yelled. This is all a setup. Nobody believed him. Mike was charged with breaking and entering, fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. Turned out, the investigators had dug up more dirt than I even realized. He had been laundering money through multiple fake businesses, not just mine. He was going away for a long time. But even after the trial, I didn't feel like celebrating. Because the truth was, I wasn't just fighting Mike. I had been fighting David's shadow. In the weeks after Mike's arrest, I went back through old files. Old emails. Old records. And I found something that made my stomach turn. David had known. He knew Mike was stealing. There were emails where David confronted him. There were bank transfers where David covered up missing money. David had been protecting Mike for years. And he had never told me. I sat in my office, staring at the proof, feeling numb. David had loved me. I knew that. But he had also lied to me. I felt betrayed. Not just by Mike, but by the man I had trusted most. A month later, I went to David's grave for the first time since the trial ended. I stood there, staring at his name carved into stone, and I let it all out. The anger. The sadness. The frustration. I loved you, I whispered. But you should have trusted me. You should have let me help you. Instead, you protected a man who would have destroyed us both. The wind blew softly. The sky was gray. I took a deep breath. I forgive you, I said. But I won't make the same mistake. And I walked away. I kept the company. Some of the employees who had sided with Mike tried to come back. I let a few of them return. Others? I never trusted again. I made new rules. No more secrets. No more covering for family. If someone messed up, they faced the consequences. No exceptions. Looking back, I wish David had been honest with me. Maybe things would have turned out differently. But in the end, I won. I kept my business. My name. My dignity. And Mike? He'll be spending the next 15 years in prison. Sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes, it's just about surviving. And I did.